For Global Business Update, Michael Wilson joins us now from Cape Town, South Africa. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning. Asia Pacific shares up very, very slightly this morning, ending a positive end to the week. And that's simply because they feel as though they know which way the Fed's going in the United States. Yes, there will be more interest rate rises, but at least there's a degree of certainty, and that seems to be helping stocks in Asia Pacific. And also the job figures out of the United States were quite reasonable yesterday. Of course, it's the big ones today. However, the COVID surge is crippling the world's most important factories. That's what the feeling is about China right now. And also the ports at Ningbo and Qingdao are experiencing huge congestion, lots of supply chain problems, cancelled and delayed orders and all the rest of it. That's what logistics companies are saying about what's going on in China right now because of the COVID surge. I said yesterday that we should actually take notice of Samsung. Their quarterly profits fell to an 8-year low simply because of a demand slump. That's what analysts are putting it down to. Profit fell 69%. Quarter on quarter, year on year, and this basically about the lack of semiconductor demand because of or felt to be a slowing of semiconductor demand because of the ailing global economy. Taiwan is trying to tap investors. It's very, very encouraged by Elon Musk's Starlink system, which is a low Earth satellite system, and the way it's been used in the Russia-Ukraine war. Now they are obviously gearing up for any potential threats from China and are asking for international, also domestic investors to start the sort of stage one of their preparation for a Taiwan satellite defense and communications network. As far as the United States is concerned, futures slightly up ahead of today's jobs figures, but in regular trading, the Dow down about 300 points, the Nasdaq down about almost 2 points. It's expected that 200,000 new jobs will be announced that were created last month when the jobs figures come out in the United States today. One of the world's largest tech companies, Dell, wants to phase out China chips by 2024 and hoping its suppliers will do the same as well. It's part of this broad-based decoupling that the United States is trying to pull off right now away from China. But certainly that's a major company that's saying that by 2024 they'll try to pull out of China chips. The fallout from FTX in the United States continues. This is Silvergate. Now, and the reason I'm quoting this to you is because this is a Federal Reserve registered bank. This is not a fly-by-night operation, and it's really getting worried about how the implosion at FTX is actually affecting the future of cryptocurrencies in a more regulated system. This is what, and they've seen $8.1 billion pulled from investment in cryptos over the past year. As far as the UK is concerned, a slight softening as far as the strikes are concerned. There is legislation which is expected to come up against a huge amount of opposition in the House of Lords. But nevertheless, here it is that employers could be suing unions. But for lack of business and all the rest of the damage it may cause to the UK economy during those strikes. But it appears as though the government has slightly moved away from increasing the threshold for strike ballots. In other words, it's got what the government was wanting was a higher proportion of people actually being seen to vote for strike. Doubling the notice from 2 weeks to a month for industrial action, that is now out of the question. And also the fact that ambulance drivers were going to be banned from striking, that's no longer in there. And it is reported, and I can put it unfortunately no stronger than that, that nurses are now saying that they are happy, or at least the RCN, the Royal College of Nurses, is saying it would settle for 10% rather than the 19% that they've been demanding. So a slight softening as far as the strike situation in the UK is concerned. Finally, to commodities and oil and gold. Oil, first of all, no rebound there really, and demand internationally is falling. Saudis have apparently slashed their prices of oil, so short-term crude won't be ramping up to to the sort of levels that were possible yesterday. And gold appears to have found a barrier around about $1,900 an ounce. It could be up to 3,000. That is the prediction for it. And all that's based on rising inflation and falling trust of international markets and all the rest of it, which makes gold the sort of traditional safe haven. But so far, it appears to have found a barrier at around about $1,900 an ounce. That is the global view this morning.
All right, let's go back to the softening of things in the UK, but it's not moving anything. The strikes are still odd, even in the railway sector and all of that. And there are indications that will have a big blow on the British economy. So what is Rishi Sunak doing, even with the softening, with concessions here and there, but nothing is still happening?
No, I think you're right. I think it will have an effect on the economy. Of course it will. But what I'm saying is that it does look as though the government's, sitting in stand, that they were actually pulling up the drawbridge, as it were, and saying, no more discussion. Now they're slightly, as all politicians do, slightly softening their stance for those particular parts of the legislation. But they are particularly worried, I think, because the only very, very small parts of that were actually in the Conservative Party manifesto in 2019 at the time of the general election. It's felt that it will have a very thorny passage through the House of Lords. It might not make it. So hence a bit of softening. But I think the big one, if it's true, is that the Royal College of Nurses, which is obviously a public sector union, now appears to be settling for lower than the 19% that they've gone in for and would maybe, just maybe accept 10%. But again, a lot of discussions have to take place. As far as the railways are concerned, as the strike grinds on, I suspect they will find less and less sympathy from the public. But that again will be a political decision. And I suspect that the two sides may be getting together in the relatively near future. But that's as far as we go. But damage to the economy, of course.
Still on the UK, and based on the legislation, analysts have said that if you look at Europe, minimum service levels haven't quite worked. They haven't been enacted because they just don't work. Because what this means is that rather than striking nationally, perhaps they then take their strikes locally. So unions might not really be affected by this new legislation. What's your take on that?
All I can repeat is what I said. It looks as though there is a slight softening on the threshold for strike ballots, which means that it was going to be a much higher proportion of the unionised workforce would have to prove that they actually had voted for a strike. Now that seems to be moving away, and also that the notice for industrial action appears to be it's now 2 weeks. What the government wanted was to make it a month, but now they're back to 2 weeks again. So I think what we're seeing is a slight softening. But the fact of the matter is that whichever way you play this, the economy simply cannot afford much more in terms of public sector pay, because they pay tax on it, but they're not creating tax by being in private business. It's as simple as that. It happens with public services throughout the world. As I think the doctor was saying yesterday, long on promise, short on fact.
Well, Mike, I'm not too sure that I agree with you that the UK government, Rishi Sunak in particular, is softening up on the unions. The legislation that is being proposed looks like a hardening of position, because what they're saying is that, look, workers in the rail, health, and other unions must provide a minimum level of service. And if they don't provide that minimum level, then they are open to sanctions. And in fact, they could be sacked by their bosses. That doesn't look like softening to me. It looks like an anti-labor legislation being proposed by the UK. But that's not the one I want to talk about. I want to talk about the US, where the Federal Trade Commission now has come up with an non-compete proposal, clauses, saying that if you work for company A, you cannot leave company A and go and work for company B. And that is being, of course, opposed by the US Chamber of Commerce, saying that this is unlawful, this is illegal, and that they will challenge it. But from the point of view of labor relations, what do you think of this proposal by the Federal Trade Commission in the United States? And secondly, in Turkey, Turkey is now saying, oh, inflation is now lower than 84.4%. They say it's down Tuesday, according to official data. And the argument is that this is due to base effect. What is this base effect? This base effect could it be Erdogan, President Recep Erdogan, looking for a second term, because alternative agencies have said, in fact, inflation in Turkey is over 137%. So is this politics or economics?
Turkey is a mystery, I think, to most economists that try to look at it, and the way that their government treats inflation is something which what can I tell you? It's not the way that central banks around the world actually deal with it. So I think we're into the realm of politics, and I think we're into the realms of crowd pleasing, and the president there is not unaware, naturally, of the fact that general elections loom later in 2023. So, of course, he's giving as much as he can. He's been trying to increase the minimum wage in Turkey, and if it works, it works, but it will only be temporary. There is no magic money tree there. And how they manage to run an economy by lowering interest rates each time inflation actually happens defeats me, because if you just go up to the man in the street and say, do you know what this is doing to your savings? And he or she says, no, I don't, then it's pretty obvious, isn't it, that high inflation. You mentioned 83%. I've seen figures of 88%, and that's just the average. I mean, that doesn't account for food, which is much higher than that, and that's what the majority of poorer people spend the majority of their income on. So I really don't see how it works. As far as the UK is concerned, yes, I understand what you're saying. What I'm trying to say is that I think that the part of what Sunak wants to do has in fact been softened very slightly by these particular vetoes that I've just been talking about. But generally speaking, it is quite a big take on the unions. But remember, as I keep saying, it has to get through the House of Lords before it becomes law. And I think it'll be a fairly rough passage.
Okay, thank you very much, Michael Wilson. Now for business updates across the African continent, Rotus Odiri joins us. Good morning, Rotus.
Good morning, Doctor. Good morning, Ayo. Good morning, Rufai, and good morning to all our viewers out there. Well, what else is going on across Africa apart from debt and slimming down governments and the Aronsaye report? I thought about you three when I spoke with an exclusive chat with Ben Akabweze, Director General of the Budget Office. So I asked for his thoughts, and he aligned with you guys. Let's take a listen.
Absolutely. We in the Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning have remained fully supportive of implementation of the Aronsaye report. Yeah. And there's ongoing work, in that regard. It's taken, it's taken under different shades of views, about that. But we think that it's needful, and it aligns with this. The point about the Aronsaye report is not, some people interpret it as cutting and chopping and laying off staff. Right. No, what it's talking about,
club, unfortunately, so perhaps I'm wrong there. Okay.
Is that, look, there are agencies that seem to have, duplicated, mandates. So you collapse them, merge them. Of course, you'll have some savings, but those savings are likely to be at the level of folks like me. The top, the DGs. If you collapse, 3 agencies into one, 2 CEOs have no jobs. Right. But the rest of the people may have jobs. Just we've seen recently with the implementation of the PIA. Okay, we saw the former PPPRA and the former Petroleum Equalization Fund, and the downstream sections of DPR come together into a single agency called the NDMPRA. Yeah. But it didn't result in loss of jobs. If anything, they added numbers. So that's the kind of thing to assume that merging agencies necessarily will result in a massive saving of numbers isn't really.
How do you slim? There's lots of New Year's resolutions this year. People want to lose weight and so on and so forth. So how does the federal government lose weight? How do you slim down the bloated government? How do you reduce our personnel costs, which are... What's our personnel cost for 2023 in the budget? I think 5 trillion is what is the estimate, including government-owned agencies, pensions, and MDAs, which is almost as much as our debt service, which is just, it's an astounding figure. And it's something that, of course, those who seek to be leaders of the nation next month, but we'll have to tackle as well is the size of government. But again, we've talked about this ad nauseum. Mr. Sowore, again, I was very much looking forward to him talking with you three, and I thought it was very interesting when Rufai asked him about the 77 estimated, I think, isn't the figure 66? Anyway, 77 trillion naira debt waiting for the new administration. Him saying that he would pause debt repayments until an audit is carried out.
We say debt is on ground for you.
I'm in the same position. So, as president, I'm going to pause repayment of debts until I audit the debts. That's what I'll do first and foremost when I'm sworn in. I'm not repaying any debt until the audits are properly done, and because we need the money to fix the country. But Buhari has borrowed Nigeria back to the Stone Age. Everybody has agreed on that. But our problem is not debt to GDP ratio. Our problem is debt to revenue ratio. And the revenue will aggressively increase. When we get comfortable, we have I've discussed this several times, including on these shows, and I've identified several other revenue sources that either have been hidden or are not being harnessed the way they should be. I've identified taxes that are owed to Nigerian states. That's up to about 4.5 billion. I said this on Rise TV by oil companies, and those are low-hanging fruits. We have identified about 11 trillion naira of revenue-generating government agencies that are not remitted to the federal government purse. We have identified monies that could come from the NLNG, the Nigeria Liquefied Natural Gas Company. That's over $5 billion that is not remitted directly to the federal. It's remitted through the NNPC, and the NNPC just quaff the money. So I've identified several other products that can get into the international market at this time, including products like sorghum. There are a lot of mineral resources that have been sold under the table that we've identified, like brought into the official and formal processes that will give you a lot of money.
This is now the third time we've heard about mineral resources in 5 days this week. Anyway, if you pause repayments on debt, you default. So let's just put that into perspective. You can't pause your repayments to carry out an audit, because if you do that, you'll default on your debt, and then there'll be all types of problems. But Mr. Sowore, it's always hearing from him and his plans for government if he was to take power, always very, very interesting. But I hope you guys please continue to pose these questions to every one of these candidates that come aboard. Finally, Kenya. Mr. John Ngumi, he was the chair of Safaricom. About 5 or 6 months ago, he was just appointed, and he's leaving. He's out. There was a board shakeup, and he says that he is going to focus on green energy projects, which is so interesting. After just 5 months in power, at the helm of one of the largest telco firms on the African continent, he says he wants to focus on green energy. Yeah, okay. The word on the street is that he is, of course, a Kenyatta ally, a big supporter of the former president of Kenya, Uhuru Kenyatta. He was placed on the boards of some very cash-rich parastatals in Kenya, and now that there's a new government, Safaricom is aligning. So what they've done is they are seeking to partner with the Ruto administration in order to be already involved in some loan distribution programs and fertilizer distribution programs and a number of other things. So I believe the folks at Safaricom said, well, probably not a good idea to have the best friend of the man who was of the man who was running against, or rather who Kenyatta didn't support, or who wasn't behind Ruto. So that's very interesting with Safaricom. They're also I think they've still got some expansion plans as far as Ethiopia and some other African nations on the continent. So that's our update.
I mean, that's what you get, and that's the mix between big business and government. It has to be said.
Yeah.
The former CEO of Safaricom, of blessed memory, Bob Collymore, was a big friend of, Uhuru Kenyatta too, and he gave Safaricom a lot of leeway. They've been able to expand. But apart from that, you must give it to Safaricom. They've been able to build a good business over the years.
Course, yeah.
It's not. I smirk a bit when people call Safaricom just a telecom company. It's one of the biggest finance companies out of Kenya. It's one of the biggest energy companies too in Africa with M-Copper and a couple of other things they've done. So if they're diversifying and they're kicking out because of Safaricom, I mean, it's all right. Two things I'd like to say. Number one, as regards the debt issue, yes, there needs to be an audit, even on how the debt was spent, but by the provision of the budget, the debt repayment will have to continue while the audit goes on.
Yeah, of course.
And let me quickly tell you some audits that I've seen as regards even how the money was spent. It's the $100 million, and I keep talking about it because I feel so unhappy about it.
Yeah.
The new terminal built. Such a sweet terminal. It can't be used because of structural defects. That's the audit. As much as many other projects, because that deal was, I think, was 4 airports we did terminals for. I think we did Port Harcourt, Enugu, and the likes. It was 500 million from China Exim, predominantly the funding from them. But you can see we are not even using one of them, and we're not even getting the money to be able to pay back. So that and a litany of many other projects, like Mambila and the likes, and some other projects, we should look up. You see, because when you look at the debt stock, when you go to dmo.gov.ng and you look at the debt stock, when you see a couple of these projects, you're like, okay, what's the cost-benefit analysis of the project? And you don't see too many of them. Okay, I saw one with Galaxy Backbone and all of that. Till date, you still have government agencies using at yahoo.com. The .gov.ng, people will not use it. So what's the cost-benefit analysis of all of this project? Because you see, for money to be siphoned, it has to be plowed into a project. And those are the audits we need to do.
Well said.
I agree. I was just going to say, writing on that in terms of the audits. Of course, when Shore came here yesterday, he would make lofty promises that perhaps are not workable. And also, in terms of the economics of that, I have to admit that I believe that he wasn't quite prepared to respond to that. They just released the figures the day before and saying that he would halt repayment of loans. That's not really, he can't do that. So that's not realistic. But going back to what he said and streamlining the government, even based on the Warren report, and what Mr. Ben Akaboeze said from the DG of the Budget Office, that they've started the process. However, they've not been able to. It will be quite difficult because of the structure and makeup, and then putting it into, actually implementing it, very difficult. However, there must be a push for this, because if we're going to cut government spending, it has to be critical to implement that report. Without, to reassure Nigerians, it's not that people are going to lose jobs. There's going to be a massive job cut, because we also know the impact of that on unemployment figures. However, in terms of catching out the ghost workers, in terms of slimming out, like Rufai said yesterday, those who are clocking in every day but not doing anything at all in the offices, that has to be streamlined, absolutely.
Okay, Rotus, yesterday you posed a question that we should ask, what's his name? Mr. Shore. I asked Omoyele Shore pointedly that Rotus had posed this question. And he said he was going to audit, the debts, even if Zainab Ahmad has said that, she's not going to restructure the debts and all of that. And he said he will audit. Okay, the audit is important in the interest of transparency and accountability, particularly with regard to ways and means.
Yes.
Okay? Over 22.7 trillion that Nigerians would pay up to 40 years that they now say they will securitize and reduce, according to Patience Uniha of the DMO, the interest rate from 18.5% to 8.5%, 9%, you know, if you round it up. So, yeah, that's his own view. But is it something that he can do? Will he become Nigeria's president? However, what is signposted is that that's an issue that all of us have to talk about. Yep. A debt of 77 trillion naira, you know, for the incoming government, that's a serious matter.
Very serious.
It means that, as I pointed out on this program, that the next government is inheriting an empty treasury. The second point that you raised with regard to Bernard Kabuizi, this is a case of unnecessary familiarity breeding contempt. Because yesterday, when I told you about the Oronsaye report, you were arguing with me. And I said the objective is not about job losses. Now, Bernard Kabuizi said the same thing. You are putting him on that. Bernard Kabuizi, hold on. Bernard Kabuizi was a commissioner in Lagos. At the time, I had a ringside seat in the Federal Executive Council of this country. And I was there. I was part of the process. There are many other things I can tell you about that report, which I may not say on television. Okay? So, I mean, so you now come, you say, Kabuizi is confirming what you said.
Yeah, he's aligning with
yesterday.
You.
Yes, that's what you said.
Yes.
Yeah, but when I told you, you were arguing with me. This is not a program for arguments.
Yes.
It's about conversation. I don't do Google, internet. I speak from exposure and experience.
Right.
However, my final point on this program today is to ask you, we haven't seen the new Naira notes. Everybody is complaining. ATMs are still dispensing old Naira notes. So where is the CBN?
Right.
Where are the banks? What do you think is responsible? In fact, where is the CBN governor?
So to respond to your prior point, I still maintain that the Oronsaye report has not been implemented for a reason. And the reason is that it is difficult to try to implement the change. So whether it's Bernard Kabuizi, and he was an exclusive interview, which is why I put that here, simply saying that he agreed with you, but I don't agree with you, and I still don't agree with him. It is difficult to try to streamline these things, and that is the reason why it has not happened. So let's see whether a new government is able to do it. Let's see who can. But it is incredibly, incredibly tough. You heard what he said about the number of total employees that we have, and even if you try to realign agencies here and there, your cost savings are still not going to be that much. That was another key thing that he said. So that debate is still very much on the table. So whether it's him, whether it's the president, whether it's you three, I still do not agree, and that is validated by the fact that the Oronsaye report, after how many years, has not been implemented. On the new Naira notes, I'm cashless, so I suggest everybody go cashless and not worry about any notes. Everybody go cashless.
Even the NFIU,
yeah, the new
financial institute,
no cash withdrawals for government.
They are also
agencies.
saying they support a cashless policy. But how they are going to impose that is another issue.
Of course,
because I looked at their details and I say, well, you may quote the law, but has anybody ever followed that law? And they are given a deadline of March 3.
Amen.
So we have to pay attention to the details and stay away from what they say on Twitter and Google and internet and try to, interrogate issues more deeply. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.